We are recording. Joe, are you expecting anyone else on your end?
I am not. It is only me tonight.
Great. Let's get started. I'd like to call the Mount Greylock Regional School District School Committee to order. It is Thursday, July 18th, 2024, 5 p.m. We are meeting remotely via Zoom. The meeting is available on Willie TV channel 1302 and will be posted on the Mount Greylock Regional School District YouTube channel within 24 hours, as well as willienet.org. If we could please call the order alphabetically by last name, starting with Julia.
Bowen here.
Conry here.
Constantine here.
Green here.
Thank you.
Boy here.
Miller here.
Thank you. At Mount Greylock Regional School District, our mission is to create a community of learners working together in a safe and challenging learning environment that encourages restorative-based processes, respect, inclusive diversity, courtesy, integrity, and responsibility through high expectations and cooperation, resulting in lifelong learning and personal growth. First up on the agenda, approval of minutes. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the June 13th, 2024 minutes?
So moved.
Julia, was that you?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Julia moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor?
Bowen, aye.
Conry, aye.
Christina Carey, I think, raised her hand. I don't know.
Yeah, no, sorry, Jose, I missed you in the lineup on the roll call, I think. Sorry about that. Did you go or?
I did go, yeah.
Okay, so then
No.
you're for voting next.
Yeah.
So are you voting aye?
All right, Carey. Yes, I.
Okay. Green eye. It just really throws us off when anybody's missing. Okay.
Malloy abstain.
Miller, I'm in a hotel lobby, so I have to be quiet.
Okay, that motion passes. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the June 18th, 2024 minutes?
So moved.
Carrie, or sorry, Julia moves. Carrie, do you second?
Yes, I do.
Great. Any discussion on those minutes?
Nope.
Okay, hearing none, all in favor?
Bowen, aye.
Conry, aye.
Constantine, I.
Green eye.
Malloy, aye.
Miller, I.
Thank you. That motion passes. Okay. Next up on the agenda, new policy, student-owned devices policy, JT. Joe, do you want to kick us off on this policy?
Sure. The policy has not changed since it was initially presented a few months ago now. The policy, as it's presented to you, first was developed jointly with the principals and other administrative staff. It's gone through the school councils, the student councils, the policy subcommittee. I'm sure in a moment we'll talk about the meetings that it has had where the public has participated. The summary, I think, of the input that we've received into the nature of this policy is parents and guardians, I believe, and I was trying to think through this today, I believe 100% of the input that we have received has been in favor, which is pretty remarkable. On the student side, a lot of students have been in favor. Some have been in favor, relieved that some of this burden will not be on them anymore to try to navigate with them and their friends. Some of it is with reservation around the idea that they really are hesitant to not be in close touch with everybody all the time, that it's something that they're very accustomed to. Some students have voiced desires to utilize their devices for academic purposes, or for being able to listen to music, to drone out the sound of other people in the hallway, things like that. And those are areas where we are actively trying to navigate the possibilities through the student, through the Chromebooks that are supplied to students, the opportunities that we have there, and also in situations where those are not sufficient, or I shouldn't say sufficient, not sufficient, but not ideal for what a classroom is doing. We actually want to hear that so that we can equitably upgrade or bring other devices there or use different software. And then, so I think the student input is really mostly in favor, some with reservations about not being in close touch constantly, some with desires to have their voices heard when they want to point out areas of their lives that are inconvenienced, academic or otherwise. And we're trying to work towards having good conduits through the ramp up period, especially with this. So, and then there are some students who are opposed. There are some students who view this as an infringement upon their independence, or that wish that we had some form of graduated policy where it existed in its purest form within younger ages and gradually phases out or creates opportunities for others. I think a critical part of our response to that final segment of the student population is that this is not meant to be punitive. It's really meant to create environments where in-person interactions, in-person learning are paramount and focused upon, and where we can all have that shine through. And we hope the same for all of us as adults working within the school district and really being present with people. And the other side of kind of that in our response is that if we were to have gradual changes in this policy dependent upon age, that would put a real dent in some of the key positive aspects of it, in that when no student has a device, the social pressures, the anxiety around missing out on the thing that your, for instance, older peers are participating in dissipates, and that is an important, from a psychological perspective, from all of the documentation that we have around the country and the world on this topic, trying to avoid that as much as possible by blanketing with this policy is important, and it's something that we view as being critical to the success and positive impact of the policy. So that was a lot of preamble, but I wanted to make sure to cover a lot of the different bases. And I think I should turn it over to the policy subcommittee because they've had some lengthy meetings over the last few months on this topic, and they've also got their motion for the committee.
Great, thank you. Jose?
Yeah, thanks, Christina, and thank you, Joe. As Joe just communicated, the Policy and Governance Subcommittee have unanimously moved this policy for consideration to the floor of the full committee. Would anyone like to second our motion?
I will second the motion after you read it. Or is it just that you accept the
I don't know.
policy?
I can read it as well. How about, because we're missing real talent here.
You don't need to read the policy, just the motion.
Oh, just the motion. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So the motion is to adopt the new policy JT on student-owned technology devices.
I will second that motion.
Thank you, Christina. Julia, well, you'll likely hear from Julia, given, to share some of the, or to summarize some of the perspectives that were shared with us. But I think Joe did it really well. So we'd like to, there are other potentially things that we could talk about, but I'd love to hear from you all if there's anything that you'd like to discuss regarding this policy.
Is Julia going to speak next, or are we going? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Stephen.
So one thing I would love to have for a policy like this is, if not a sunset clause, then a commitment for the school committee to meet and reassess after say 2 or 3 months and see how things are going. There are going to be things that are working well and even better than we expected, and then there are going to be issues that we just never thought of. And when this policy is implemented, all of a sudden we realize, oh no, we've now eliminated the ability to do X, and this was very useful. So at the very least, I hope you'll take this as a friendly motion. It doesn't have to, I mean, I'm happy to just, accept the, school committee commitment that we will reassess how this is going in 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, thank you. Julia?
Yeah, I just want to respond to that. I think you're absolutely right, Stephen, that the implementation is going to raise challenges. And I don't want to commit, I personally wouldn't want to commit us to reviewing it, but I would want to invite Joe and the administrative team to bring it back to us should there be something that changes about the policy. But I feel like we should be demonstrating a strong belief in the purpose of this policy, and by saying, and we'll revisit it, we're like halfway in, and I would prefer we are all the way in, and that Joe knows to bring it back if there's something that needs to be changed.
And Steve, oh, sorry, Steve, I'm just going to follow up really briefly. I know things may change come November, but at least for the time being, I certainly, as chair of the policy and governance subcommittee, certainly it's something that I would feel comfortable asking Joe to report back to the subcommittee. And it could be that Christina, as chair, might ask Joe to report back to the full committee in terms of what the experience has been in terms of this policy rollout. The two, to be frank, the two areas that I am concerned about, one is effectively policy implementation and enforcement, our ability to do this well. And then I have concerns regarding, sort of the blanket or the one size fits all approach to the policy. And not so much that I'm, a proponent of a graduated or a tiered implementation of the policy, but I do worry about students who have caregiving responsibilities, who are in our school building, for whom being in direct contact with a loved one or a family member is important. And we've talked about ways that those challenges could be supported by the front office. But that's something I would certainly for example, these are two areas that I would love to hear back from Joe and his team. But Stephen, just to say, I think we will welcome feedback from Joe, certainly.
Right, but I'd like to push back a little bit, and given that this is going to be a significant change and people have gotten used to the policy as is, and there's a lot of coordination that needs to be done, there's a lot of people who have grown used to doing things in different ways. I understand the reasons for why this has been proposed, but I think it would be very good for us to commit to, having this as an agenda item in 2 or 3 months and discussing, or 2 or 3 months after the start of the school year, and just discussing how things have been working, how things could work better. For example, a few years ago during the pandemic response, we passed a policy that said if you were outside the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for 24 hours, you could not come back for 8 days, even if you had a negative COVID test. And the kids who are coming from Vermont, technically, that put them in a position where, unless they were coming back during spring break, according to the policy, they could not come back. Things can happen in the implementation. Given that there are people on both sides of this issue in the community, I don't think it really costs us that much to just commit to having an agenda item in 2 or 3 months with vote by it to just discuss how things are going. We might say very quickly, seems to be working really well. There doesn't seem to be any changes needed right now. But I think it's a really good message to the community that, we're going to implement this if we so choose, but we are going to commit to a public discussion and reassessment of how it's going. So I would love the school committee to commit to that.
I will just, sorry, Joe, I was going to say, I hear you and appreciate your, effectively your request. I think I also heard you earlier, Stephen, just to make sure I didn't miss it, that you, there's an element of trust that you have in us as a school committee or in Joe and his team to report back to us, to provide that, that due diligence, you could say. It's certainly something that I would trust Christina and Joe, to revisit in an upcoming school committee meeting, in putting this either as an agenda item, we're having it be part of the interim superintendent's report. I think we can all expect that, you know, what we might hear from Joe would be different in the first 3 months, the second 3 months, and in a year. You know, there are challenges that Joe and his team, I think we need to allow Joe and his team time to, you know, iron out the wrinkles, sort out the best way to implement and hold this policy as enforceable. But I do hear your concern and your request. Joe, apologies that I interrupted you.
No worries at all. I was just gonna say, this is the kind of policy where I think naturally we would, and I'll just make a commitment now to during the November meeting, which gives us kind of a month and a half of real school to get into and make sure that we're figuring things out. We can make sure that it's an agenda item so that it's discussed, and so that if there is public comment at that point in time, public comment applying to that agenda item will fit naturally. So I can make sure that it's not embedded within a report, but instead actually an agenda item there, so that public comment is free and easy.
Yeah, Carrie.
What's great about that is that allows people to plan accordingly, to know that this school committee meeting, this will be discussed.
Right. Yeah, Carrie, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Ursula was before me. Go ahead.
Okay, apologies, Ursula.
You're muted,
There
Ursula.
you go.
Sorry, cell phone. I was going to talk about the policy in general if you were still on this topic, Carrie, about revisiting.
No, I was going to ask about the public comment that they've received at the subcommittee meetings, but Ursula, go ahead. They can come back to that.
Okay, sure. No, I just was I wanted to voice my support for this policy. I think it's awesome as a parent and as a school committee member. I think it's honestly long overdue. I think we shouldn't have phones in schools. I know, I think a lot of the towns around here have the same policy we said. I know Pittsfield has bell to bell, no cell is their thing, like similar, you know, during the school day, no cell. Every parent that I've talked to about this who's asked me to vote for it is also supportive of it. I think it sounds like everybody's kind of on the same page. And I just wanted to say how much I support it. My kids don't love it because they're teenagers and they want to be on their phone all day. But I think that, you know, 5, 6 hours in school without a phone is what we need. And they'll probably be on their phone all afternoon and all evening, like most kids are. And this is really important for the kids and the school and for our teachers and administrators to be able to do what they need to do. So huge proponent, and everyone I've talked to is also a huge proponent of this. So just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, thank you. Carrie.
Yeah, so I actually ran into some teens who said that they had gone to the policy subcommittee meetings. And so I was curious, was it mostly feedback from students at the meetings, or were there parents as well? Or if you could just talk a little bit about what public comment you did receive.
Right, yeah. At our first meeting where we were discussing this policy, and Julie can correct me, I believe we had represented 2 parents and 2 students from my memory. And at the our second subcommittee meeting, we had represented 2 parents, and there were 2 students present, but it was from 1 student that we heard from, I believe. We may have heard from 2 students that time as well. As you could suspect, the parents were that we heard from, both via email and at our subcommittee meetings, were very supportive of this policy. The students that we heard from had certainly were the folks who had the concerns. We heard from students who were advocating for sort of a tiered or graduated implementation of the policy. Particularly from our seniors, who in their view, they're going to be preparing for the real world, where they need to be able to, use a phone and use a phone wisely and be prepared for a world that they're going to enter. So there was one perspective in that regard. We also heard, I think you heard from Joe, many students who use their phone throughout the school day as a means of supporting learning. So that's how they access, white noise or any sort of sound that might help tune out distracting noises. Some students utilize their phones to listen to audiobooks, during breaks or during study periods. And for many students, from what we were told, the use of their phones in this way is really crucial to their academic success and probably overall well-being while in our school building. And it's something that we heard from Ellie, who was present at, I believe, our first meeting, and I can't recall if Ellie was present at our second. She might have been briefly at our second. I believe Ellie and Joe are committed to and are thinking creatively about ways of supporting students who would like and may need to access those kind of auditory, resources, ways of helping them stay focused during the school day, ways of kind of keeping stress controlled, and ways of, just overall sort of positive engagement throughout their school day. Julie, did I get that right in terms of your notes and what you?
Yeah, I'm actually looking at our minutes from those meetings, and I would say there were actually 3 students across 2 meetings that came. 1 student came twice. And that was a student who very strongly believes it should be a graduated, a tiered policy. There was 1 student who actually at that first meeting seemed totally fine with the policy, just wanted to make sure that he could use his own headphones and AirPods when they needed to do things on, in a class. And I think that was said to be, it would be allowed, if I remember correctly. Like, that's not in violation. It was devices that communicate with other devices. That was the problem. And then the other student, in particular, I didn't like the one size fits all approach, but also, his main point seemed to be, he wanted to make sure there was some form of review or feedback of how the Chromebooks were adequately supporting the curriculum. His concern was the Chromebooks didn't always adequately support the curriculum. And so the thing that we talked about in our committee was, and that Joe and Ellie, I think, were on board with, is having some sort of way to collect that feedback or have, student input into those kinds of concerns, because obviously that's an impact for everybody. That, all students need to have that. Joe, am I characterizing that correctly?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. That the first student's comment was around, is this all student-owned electronic devices, including my headphones that I plug into my school-supplied Chromebook? We said no. The wording in the policy is specific to only those devices that are capable of, on their own, communicating with others, which means headphones are fine. Also, electronic watches are fine. Fitness type watches are fine as long as they're not sending text messages or making phone calls. So that addressed one student's comments. There is a comment generally around, I use my phone to get around the firewall. Like I use it to be able to access content that the school's content filtering does not allow. And we are going through the process of trying to make sure that students and staff are able to more easily make suggestions or to prepare for content that they're going to be teaching, saying, here are things that I need to be searchable. Here are things that content, because again, it goes back to an equity issue to me, in that if the school supplied Chromebooks don't allow you to do the research that you need to do, but the person with the MacBook that comes from home that is a big problem. And we need to address that problem, as opposed to saying, well, everybody just use MacBooks, and if you don't have one, sorry, you're not going to be able to complete the assignment. So I really want to focus on the equity side of things. And then the other comment around music and white noise and audiobooks, that is an area, just like Julia said, where Ellie and I were trying to work to make sure that some of those services, some of those opportunities, as best we can.
We might have lost Joe, but I think we can imagine what he was about to say. Which gives me the chance to, the focus, I think, of our conversation and the conversations that we've had have been on, smartphones, our phones themselves, And you can see written in the policy, and you heard this from Joe directly, this is really about any device that's capable of communicating directly to another device, which includes laptops. And I think we need to acknowledge I'm trying to choose the right word here. I was going to say burden, but the pressure that this will place on Ellie and Ellie's team to ensure, just as we were about to hear Joe say, that our Chromebooks are functional in all of the ways that we need them to be and expect them to be to serve the variety of needs that our students face during the school day. And that's that. And Stephen, speaking back to your point, this is something that I think, we will want to hear from perhaps Joe and maybe Ellie directly in terms of how well they're able to sort of meet the needs that are being asked of them. And there might be down the road, who knows, requests or needs that are made of our district in terms of our ability to provide the variety of resources that our students require while they're in our buildings. Yeah, Carrie. Sorry, Joe, we lost you, Joe, and I tried my best to emulate you. And I don't think I did very well, but I tried. Carrie.
My apologies. My device overheated, so it shut down temporarily.
There you go. So smartwatches. So kids who use smartwatches or faculty, staff who use smartwatches, do they need to leave those at home or, get a regular watch? What's the suggestion there?
Smartwatches that are able to send text messages or make phone calls are included within the scope of this policy.
Right.
For students who have them at Mount Greylock Regional School, they will be required to them in their locker until the end of school, and then they can put them back on and continue to use them. So they are just like a cell phone
Right.
or a tablet or a computer.
So I guess practically speaking, if someone needs to wear a watch in order to tell time, since they don't have their phone to tell time, and are we recommending that they use something other than a smartwatch?
Yes.
Okay.
So that is an area where having a smartwatch would be a disadvantage, and that you would need to get some other watch to wear if you want to wear a watch during the school day. Yes.
And Carrie, your question brings up a point about the ability of students to store smartwatches and phones and the like. Clearly at the middle school, high school, we have that ability. I believe, Joe, and at Lanesboro Elementary, we also have that ability for students to store watches and smart devices. But at Williamstown Elementary, we don't have lockers available. And so what are the plans for students who arrive to school and need to store a smartwatch or a smart device?
Just like you said, like we discussed during the subcommittee meeting, Mount Greylock Regional School, all students have a locker. They'll be able to keep their devices within that locker during the school day. Same thing at Lanesboro Elementary School. At Williamstown Elementary School, those devices will not be allowed in the building. If you need to bring one in because, for instance, you're going somewhere after school where it's required, switching households, things like that, the front office is already making plans for you being able to show up at the front office before the start of school, pass that device. The front office will secure it during the school day and give it back to you right at the end of school.
Do all the lockers have locks, or do the students have to supply those? Are they requested? I don't recall them being built in.
All Mount Greylock lockers have locks, and students use those locks. They're combination locks, and it's actually a part of the rite of passage as you move up to 7th grade right now is knowing how to use a combination lock and being able to do that. At Lanesboro Elementary School, there are not locks on the lockers, and that is an area where Nolan Pratt, principal, is thinking through how to best navigate situations where students are not comfortable with putting their device into a locker that does not have a lock. The suggestion, of course, is don't bring the device into school, but we are looking at whether or not there are ways to augment their ability to secure what they've got.
And apologize for laughing. I was recalling my my teenager as a 7th grader learning how to open his locker. It took a few tries, Joe. It was a rite of passage, definitely.
Yeah.
Um,
I would love to just add all of that's been said, but to the question of other comments that we received, we had one parent join our last meeting, and I really appreciated the way he described his commitment to this, or his support of this. And that was in an invitation to our teens to experience a high school where they are not constantly tied to their phones. And he invited the adults on the call to recall our own high school experiences where that was not central to our high school experience, and how much it's certainly possible and how it was freeing. And I just wanted to appreciate the way he described that. There's no way I can do justice to what he said, but it was more invitational and celebratory for our students than we're taking something away. And I think that that's an important distinction.
Kind of
Can I
like
add to
losing
that?
power.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just remembering,
Sorry.
you know, the difficulty of being yeah, it should be fun, but it's not
Yeah.
if you're used to just being connected all the time.
Right. I just wanted to add on to what Julia just said. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think, you know, I mentioned, oh, my 3 teens were like, oh, we're not going to have our phones. It's horrible. But I think the kids are really all going to be relieved when it gets to this point, and nobody has a phone in school. So it's not like you're the only one without your phone. But to your point, Julia, you get to just do your school thing and be with your friends and talk to your teachers and not be constantly snapping and TikToking and whatever else they do. And I actually think they're really going to like it. They complain about it because they're kids, but I think it's going to be really good for everyone. And I think it's going to be a big relief. I think they'll figure out how to like it. So.
Boredom is good.
Especially in school, because you can pay attention to school and what your teacher is saying.
And talk to your classmates. You know, it's an
Yeah.
opportunity to create a challenge of get to know as many classmates as you can before you graduate.
Yeah, I think it'll be good.
Are we ready to vote?
Yes, I was going to say, any further discussion? We have a motion that has been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
sorry, Christina. Sorry, I was just
No,
gonna, you know, and just to so Stephen, I think we all heard, and I certainly, you know, welcome and look forward to, you know, reporting from Joe and his team regarding how this policy is being experienced and how well we've been able to implement and effectively enforce it. Because you know, we're all sure that this is going to add, you know, challenges and some burden to our teaching and administrative staff. But sorry, Christina, I just wanted to reiterate that.
Steve?
Yeah, so just following up on what Jose just said, you know, I really appreciate, and I think this is just an example of good governance, that when we're doing major changes like this, you know, we commit not only to revisiting, but to giving plenty of notice to the community as to when this is going to happen so that people can be prepared.
Thanks, Steve. Okay. All in favor?
Bowen, aye.
Conry, aye.
Constantine, I.
Green eye.
Malloy, aye. Yay.
Abstain.
And that motion passes. Okay, thank you very much for that informed discussion. Our next upcoming meetings, we have a finance subcommittee meeting July 25th at 5 p.m. And our next regular school committee meeting is actually on August 22nd at 6 p.m. And that's it. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Julia moves.
Second.
Carrie seconds. All in favor?
Bowen, aye.
Conry, aye.
Constantine, I.
Green eye.
Malloy, aye.
Miller, aye.
Many thanks.
5:34 and we are adjourned.
many thanks to the policy subcommittee and to the administrators who helped to work on this. Took a lot of time. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all.
Thank
Thank you.
Have a good
Good
night.
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 Okay.
Bye.